Welcome, folks, to The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. Every week, diving deep into the truth of Catholic social teaching and restoring all things in Christ. The Uncommon Good, live from Iowa Catholic Radio's Mercy Live Up Studios.
The Uncommon Good is on the air. I'm Bo Bonner.
I'm Dr. Bud Marr.
We are coming to you, me live from Iowa, Bud from Pittsburgh, because of robots. We are coming to you through the airwaves, however you hear us, across the big old world. We're great to have you with us today. Bud, I think you're using Skype today, so I feel like your presence is in the room, like I can hear you breathe.
Well, every show you mention the robots, and today it feels especially robot-oriented. I'm connected to, like, there's wires extending from my body, and I'm wearing one of those weird helmets.
Oh, so it's like Tron, basically.
Basically.
Well, that's good to know. Well, so Iowa Catholic Radio's Mercy Live Up Studio, Bud, French Fry Central in Pittsburgh. We got a wonderful show for you today. Hey, Bud, it's a normal March. Oklahoma State and Nebraska, our two teams, got left out of the big dance. That seems, like normal. To make up for it, Russell Westbrook has now officially had 100 triple-doubles in his career, and that made me think, what's a triple-double on radio, Bud?
A triple-double on radio would be, I'm not sure. You've stumped me with that one.
I'm trying to decide if John Leonetti leads the radio triple-doubles, whatever that might be.
I'm sure he does. I just got a text from him that he's stuck in the middle seat of an airplane, so
that's sort of a triple-double.
He was comparing it to purgatory. I thought, John, melodramatic.
Yeah, maybe settle down a bit. Well, as always, Iowa Catholic Radio, underwritten by Cartridge World, 801 73rd Street in Windsor Heights. Good for whatever printing needs you need. For instance, if you need to print off multiple letters and send them off to the NCAA selection committee making complaints, for instance, Bud. What else would you imagine that you could use all these printing cartridges for?
Well, the great thing about Cartridge World is I think they can meet the needs of families and kind of smaller printing needs, but they've got pickup and delivery available for business customers. They're committed to eco-friendly printing, so a lot of great things there.
And then also, as always, underwritten by Mercy College of Health Sciences. No wait list. We have plenty of online programs for you to get in touch with no matter where you're at. An RN to BSN, Healthcare Administration, and Health Information Management, all online. And then if you want to come spend a hard-working but wonderful 12 months at Mercy College up in Des Moines, they have an accelerated BSN, a 12-month program for study for those who have a previous BA. But I could not do an accelerated anything. If you're going to do an accelerated nurse degree, you already have my respect.
Yeah, that word accelerated, that's impressive. I know with my own education, I dragged it out as long as possible.
Decelerated.
Decelerated. And I know the special events come fast and furious for you guys. The next speaker's coming up, right, for Faith and Healing?
Yes, April 5th, our buddy, William English, Dr. William English, professor out at Georgetown. And, Bud himself is going to be in Des Moines not very long from now. What is that, the 24th?
March 24th, Saturday at 7 p.m., I'll be speaking about Vatican II, the most recent council in the church that continues very much to impact our lives as Catholics, so it'll be a good time.
So that's on a weekend, so, regional people can drive into that. We just had the men's conference here in Des Moines that I emceed, and nobody fired me on the stage, so I thought it went pretty well, Bud.
What was the highlight of the men's conference?
I don't know. I don't want to say lunch, or my jokes. That seems wrong. But Antonio Benuelos, who is the state deputy for the Knights of Columbus, dared me to touch a cactus, but we both declined. That was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
So who do we have on the show today, Bud?
So today we have one of David Mills, who is one of our first guests on the show, going back almost a couple of years now. He's been an editor at First Things. He now writes for Aleteia and Ethika, Politika. So David's going to be talking about how we experience the church on a personal level, so kind of bringing together a theology of the church with sort of our weekly experience of that reality. So it'll be a good conversation.
Yeah, sometimes when you think of the common good, it's easy to think of it in terms of pure abstractions, as it were. But on a day-to-day basis, and especially, like you said, on the weekend, every Sunday, we really do live out the body of Christ. And sometimes people, maybe like if you're a convert, you might get the impression that will be easy or clean or not messy. And I think David does a good job of trying to ground us about what that might actually mean and look like.
Yeah, as someone who grew up in a different tradition, I would say for Catholics, the experience of the church is front and center in how they experience God's love, and that can be a good thing for a lot of people. It can present some challenges because our lives as Christians are incarnational, and so when I was a chaplain back in the day, I had a lot of conversations where I think for some it's difficult to separate their experience of those in the church with their understanding of who God is. But those can't be separated. Like, we need to think about it rightly, and I think David has a lot of insights in that regard.
That's right. You might be expecting a Kirk Cousins experience of the church, but maybe what God has in mind is Case Keenum. I'm making a Denver Broncos joke now. But the idea being is we go into it thinking it might be one thing. It begins to look like another, but that might all be for the best in the end. So yes, folks, it's going to be a wonderful show. We'll have David Mills coming in. We'll have Bud. We'll have whoever is listening on Skype, FBI, Russians, whoever it might be. And then all of you who's listening on the show. So stick around. We're going to go take our first break here. And when we get back, we'll have David Mills talking about the experience, the lived out experience of the church. This is the uncommon good. And we'll be back. Folks, we want you to be welcome to comment on the show, especially if we're going to talk about the lived-out experience of the church. It might be quite a fun thing to do to hear from you talking about the lived-out experience of the church. And for that, we have the ability for you to text in with Zip Whip. That's right, Zip Whip, 515-223-1150, 515-223-1150. You can be a part of the show. Like I said, we have wide-ranging topics, of course, always about the common good, but today it would be a really great one to hear from you. What's it like to be there in the pews? Is there something David or Bud or myself have said that really sticks with you? If that's the case, use Zip Whip. 515-223-1150. 515-223-1150. You can be a part of the show. We would love for you to text in, or if you want to come be a part of the show through social media, Iowa Catholic Radio on Facebook, at IA Catholic Radio is our Twitter handle. God bless, and we will see you after these commercials.
Reading used to be hard for Hannah. She struggled to sound out and read new words, skipped words, or made them up. Hannah completed Learning RX training, and now her skills and her confidence have soared. She completes her homework independently, and her grades improved in other classes, even math. Learning RX programs help you learn easier, think faster, and perform better. OnlineLearningRx.com/Ankeny or 515-224-4819. Free sessions are available. Radio code HANNAH.
Is it time for a new roof? Then it could be time for you to get to know Bell Construction. Bell Construction is a roofing company entering its 30th year of business. They specialize in residential re-roofs, like commercial jobs, and have the experience to meet all of your roofing needs with personal service. With Bell Construction, the owner will come to your home or place of business in person to inspect and ensure the quality of work that you deserve. They pride themselves in working with you on a personal basis and making sure you are satisfied. Bell Construction, 515-963-4494.
Support for the Uncommon Good is provided by Cartridge World. Cartridge World is an industry leader delivering high-performance printing products that help you save time, money, and print great.
Perfect for businesses, home offices, college students, or busy moms trying to find affordable printing supplies including ink, toner, paper, or printers. For business customers, pickup and delivery are available. Products are guaranteed or full replacement.
Cartridge World, your low-cost, environmentally friendly printing experts, 801 73rd Street in Windsor Heights, 515-564-7400, and online at cartridgeworld.com. Hey, Bud, do they have money in Pittsburgh?
Oh, yeah, we have money.
Oh, I thought maybe you used French fries in an elaborate bartering system.
French fries are for your salads, but most of the bartering is with money.
Okay, well, Bud, this show doesn't run on French fries or just happy thoughts. It actually runs on money. Did you know that?
Sounds like folks should be looking forward to the Carousel.
Look, folks, you might not have wonderful talents with sound effects like Bud, but you can donate your time, your talent, your treasure. Carathon, coming up March 19th. This is the Uncommon Good. Bo Bonner, Dr. Bud Marr. Sorry if you didn't get to hear it, but Jeb is a miracle man, and we got to hear a promo. Bud, did you hear your voice? Bud. Uh-oh. Maybe we've lost Bud. Bud's voice was...
Bo. With the Carathon sound effects?
Yeah.
Carathon!
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. You see, when you love people, you get to, like, they treat you nice, Bud.
I feel like that's my anchor to the station, that kind of the shout-outs for the different promos.
Yeah.
But if Jeb can just, like, craft those on a soundboard, I might be in trouble.
You're getting replaced by robots. It's just, it's quite a thing, yeah.
Robots!
Yeah.
So our guest this morning is David Mills. He's the former executive editor of First Things and now senior editor at The Stream. He writes for several Catholic publications, including Aleteia. David might have to correct my pronunciation there. And also hourofourdeath.org. His latest book is Discovering Mary, and you can follow him on Twitter at David Mills, WRTNG. David, thanks for being with us.
I'm going to speak for David real quick. We're getting him on the phone right now. But like we said, an all-star of the show. He was one of the earlier guests we had. His writing is proficient, and he puts out more writing per week to shame all of us. And now he's on the line, and he hears us bragging about him. David, you got to settle down so that we all start looking like we actually do work, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So, Bud, go ahead. What was your opening question?
Well, my opening question, David, I was going to follow up with Bo's remark about making us look bad. You've recently kicked off another project, hourofourdeath.org, and I was just wondering when you find time to sleep and eat. We're a little worried about you. You've written on a number of topics. Today we were hoping to talk some about the nature of the church and our experience of it at sort of the parish level. One of my favorite articles of yours that you've written is Here Comes Everybody, Even the Annoying Ones. And for someone like myself, that's a reassuring message.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I'm a convert. I entered the church in 2001 after years of grew up fairly secular, and then years of being an Episcopalian. And one of the things that attracted me to the church all along, even from when I first discovered Christianity, was, I go to the churches. Friends would take me to the churches in the college town where I grew up, and people were basically the same. I mean, you could sort of identify those are the Episcopalians, those are the Presbyterians, those are the Baptists, those are the Congregationalists, a certain type. And then occasionally a friend would take me to St. Bridget's uptown, and it really was sort of, I was just struck by, there were a lot of the town workers went there. You had students from the university, you had sort of everyday people. It was, it was even at that age, say 16, 17, 18, 20, it was striking to me that was the church where you found everyone. And I just love that. I really like that.
Yeah, David, I think it's interesting. Sometimes, I think about this in many ways in life. We're trying to get people to go to the college where I work. We're trying to get people to listen to the show. We're trying to, market to people. And sometimes people look at maybe what can be a negative and bemoan it or complain about it. But sometimes, counterintuitively, it's the very thing that we see as a negative that people on the outside are amazed at and actually realize that there's something more going on. I grew up Southern Baptist and then stopped through in the Methodist Church. And it's like you said, you get to the Catholic Church, and maybe if you're a read-in convert, I have experience with that, you kind of think like, I'm going to finally make it to the Catholic Church where things are nice and calm. You quickly are relieved of that idea, and eventually, hopefully, you start to appreciate the fact that all these, like, you can look at it and say, man, there's so much infighting, or you can look at it and go, man, we have a really big house with a really big family and a father that allows us to maybe go at each other's throats a bit too much, but certainly thinks that we all belong.
Yeah, when I first became a Catholic, I joined the pro-life committee at our parish, and I've been on the National Episcopal Pro-Life Board, the organization, and I've done all these things, and I mentioned that at the first meeting, and in an Episcopal parish, if I went to a new parish and said, when I taught at the seminary, I did this, that, and everything, I'd be on the vestry of the parish council right away, be invited to do these things, people would be impressed. And, the first thing that struck me is people asked who I was, what I did, and I said all this, and I expected them to say, wow, that's really cool, great. And I said, oh, that's nice. It fell completely, which was fine. It was actually good for me, but it was surprising that what had mattered in my previous life didn't matter at all in this new world. And then you also have the experience that, in the Episcopal Church at least, you would talk to people who are basically like you. You might have real theological debates, real hard ones and have real differences, but otherwise people are basically like you. They came from the same social class, they read the same books, they watched, they all watched PBS and listened to National Public Radio, and they drove Volvos, and it was all that. And in the Catholic Church, I talked to some of the older men at the I'm suddenly blanking. Knights of Columbus, and they live in such different worlds than I do, completely different. And they challenge me and push me, and and they have wisdom that I don't have. Even though they don't have my education, they don't have my background, but they know stuff. They've seen stuff. They've done stuff. They prayed all their lives. They've been to daily mass for decades. And that's also, it's not just that I sort of like the mixture of people. It's the church forces me to meet people and deal with people and engage with people that are so different from me and that just know, in some ways vastly more than I do about the really important things.
David, one of my favorite lines from that article is the church requires a lot and very little. You have to agree to a lot and live that way, but you don't have to be any sort of person. And I think about, as communities of faith, when we think about being welcoming and inviting people, I've seen ways that's been framed where it was kind of like, one denomination that I saw used the idea of like open hearts, open doors. And we're balancing something here where in our faith there's this very high calling, and we're called to be saints, and we want to cast that message. And yet sometimes that can be heard, I think, outside the church as sort of like, I'm not welcome there because I'm not at a certain place in my life or in this spiritual journey. Do you have any insights on how we navigate that line between like still casting this high calling and yet not giving people the sense like, well, you have to be a different type of person to be incorporated here?
That's a really interesting question. My own experience, I think it's the not even sure of the jargon word, alternation, or it's the part of that solved in the back and forth of church life. So you have Ash Wednesday and Good Friday and penitential practices and so on through the whole year, and confession, and that say you're not good enough, you're not that really do make you think about your sins. But on the other hand, you also have the absolution after confession, and you have Easter Sunday after Good Friday, and you have Easter season after Easter Sunday, Easter season after Lent. And so I think, I've never really felt, I probably haven't felt judged enough in some ways in the church. That really hasn't been my experience, but partially because the church says, okay, especially in confession, look, examine your conscience, this is what you've done, this is what you've done wrong, this is where you fall short, this is where you said no to God. And then the priest says the absolute, you say the act of contrition, which is lovely, and the priest says the absolution, and you can bounce out. And I always just as I leave the confessional, I always look over the tabernacle, and there's Jesus sitting there waiting for me, welcoming me back, so to speak, or saying, well, now that you're clean, let's talk. So I really haven't had the same experience as you do, but I think my experience is the church actually provides those two things back and forth, that one says, one calls you to a higher life, and one gives you the help. Says, okay, we're with you, and there are rewards. There's the mass. There are other things that you get from it that help you along. So I really
like that. That's kind of like let the liturgy do the speaking. Bo and I had a professor in grad school who had a bumper sticker. I'll have to revise the translation a little bit, but it said like, Jesus loves you, everybody else thinks you're a jerk. And sometimes I think we feel like it's like our personal duty to ship everybody into shape, when really like you're saying, David, there's all these pieces that are already there in the church's life that speak that message for us.
Yeah, and a lot of it, I mean, maybe we've been blessed by our own pastor, but his homilies, he's one who actually does talk about sin and about falling short and about saying no to God. But he always, talks about God's forgiveness, God's love. He frequently points to the tabernacle and talks about how, Jesus is right there, literally right there for us. And I think a lot of it just comes through the message. And so I felt nothing but sort of pretty much nothing but welcome in the church. So
this is The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. We're speaking with David Mills. David, so Bud has the erudite point that he takes from your article. The part that I like from your article is One Note Johnnies. It's a single issue Christians, because I've grown up around them my entire life, and they're some of my favorite people, even though they are often nuts. And I guess so. This is unfair because I've always loved talking to people, even if they have a passion for incredibly strange things. Maybe I have something wrong with me, but I thought you had such a prescient observation here that there's other churches. I mean, and this is not us talking trash on anyone. These are articles out on the internet that say it's important that you either silence or don't even let a one-issue Christian into your churches because it can cause such problems. And I think you're kind of, to overblow your point, it's like, who would be a part of how would your parish be filled if you kicked out one-issue Catholics, right? And that there's a way in which we want to police who gets to come in, like you said, so it can be a bunch of our buddies, but the very ecclesiology of the church prevents that. Yeah,
I think, it's one of the things in dealing with talking to the church about my Protestant friends and some of my people on the internet and people who read what I write and write me. One of the things they like to sort of throw at is the average parish doesn't do X or Y, and I go to such a community Baptist church, and we have this and we have that, and we're united and so on, and bully for them, good for them. But part of the problem with the church isn't like that. The parish isn't like that. It's as if you're trying to put a team together. They're putting together a basketball team or a baseball team or a football team, and that's all they do. Whereas the average Catholic parish is people who play football, people who play basketball, people who baseball, people who play curling, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
And people who hate sport. It's that sort of thing. So you're not going to have the same kind of single-minded focus you get in a lot of Protestant churches, and they say that's they look at the Catholic Church, but St. George's down the street doesn't do this, that, and the other thing, and we say, but that's part of the glory of the church is you do have all these different people together, and they feel welcome. It's their parish, according to canon law, it's their church. They belong there, and it doesn't matter if they don't have to say, I love baseball, so I can't go to a football playing church. I'm a Catholic, so I go to the Catholic Church.
Well, I think another interesting way to put this is. And on one hand, we're here on the radio, we all write, we all go give talks. We want Catholics to be more involved in their faith. And I don't know if there's some magic percentage or not where we have active, involved Catholics. But on the other hand, it's strangely something to brag about that we have so many half-hearted Catholics. And I know that sounds weird, but I think it's this phenomenon that's very strange, that you will have people just hanging on the church for years, and it's a testament, right, that we really that here comes everyone of that's taken from James Joyce, being both prophetic and trying to make a pot shot at the church. There's a way in which you say, the actual shining example that the church is who it says it is we have a lot of people who are not really into it, and they're still here, and so at any rate, I know that's not me excusing lukewarmness, but it's a counterintuitive mark of the church, I think.
Yeah, you have all sorts of people sort of hanging on by their fingernails, and we say, well, they should be fully involved. They should sort of climb into the building, so to speak. And then as you say, it's an amazing thing they're hanging on their fingernails because we don't know what they're going through, why they're hanging on by their fingernails. That may be the best they can do. And again, looking at our sort of our peers in other churches. You can basically often you either measure up or you get out, and so it's a measure of the church's grace that kindness and charity and love for her people. It says, we want you to have the full Catholic life. We want you all the way in the building, but if you can only sort of hang by the fingernails from the windowsill, we'll take it. Because we eventually want you to climb in and we want to pull you in. It's a very different attitude, and I find one that's actually very attractive and moving. Because I can imagine myself being one of those people, who might be hanging by his fingernails and just wants to sort of hold on and can't let go. And the church has said, "We're here. We're not moving. We'll pull you in if you need to. When you ask us."
Do you guys ever worry about with sort of the increased mobility of our society and just the way that more and more people think about practicing the faith, that we might be losing some of this? I just know in conversations recently I've heard comments like, well, that's the social justice parish, or that's like the high church parish, And how do we kind of work against this tendency to maybe turn parish life into a kind of identity, or having like certain characteristics that set it apart from other churches?
Well, that's actually a really good question, and one probably more for pastors. But it's a natural human tendency to find an identity, and an identity not just in Christ and in the church, but to something else. We're Catholic plus social justice, Catholic plus high liturgy, Catholic plus Marian devotion. No, I suppose part of it. A lot of the answer is that the church's forms are set. You have Mass daily. You have this. You have that. And to some extent, if you do that, and with pastoral charity and each member being charitable to the others, and it may be that this parish emphasizes social justice more than others, and others emphasize a sort of richer worship experience. But if you just keep doing what keep the church doing and recognize that everyone in the parish may be very different, have very different interests, and you try to do something to include everyone, and not sort of be overboard on your particular issue. And that's about all. I think that's what you do. It's not a very good answer, but a lot of it depends on the life of the local parish and the kindness and charity and openness of the pastor and the people in the local parish. So if you love high liturgy and you have half the congregation who really wants the lowest, quickest said Mass, then you both sort of bow to each other as in a dance. You might lower your liturgy if the pastor, and you might learn to enjoy it if you're the low church parishioner.
I think, and this is not me saying like a 1-to-1 ratio here. I'm just thinking I grew up with one brother. We were very 80s Protestant. I already have 4 kids. Bud has 14 or something. I haven't checked since he moved to Pittsburgh. But I will say one thing that I think is very interesting. When I grew up around a lot of, 2-kid families, and you either had siblings that were a lot alike, or you had siblings that seemed that they weren't alike at all, right? They were completely divergent. The weird thing when you start having quite a few kids is they all start really evening out. My 4 kids are all very different, but they're all clearly Bonners, God bless them, they've been cursed with that. And you sort of see that, right? You see these families that have a lot of kids, and, there's the athletic one and the nerdy one and the this, that, and the other. But on the other hand, they're like all Mars, right? They're all these kids. And I think that sort of happens with the church. Is, like you said, because it's like a family, and we're going to include the black sheep, because if it wasn't for the black sheep, we wouldn't have very many people to begin with. There is a way in which it sort of evens out. And we're all distinct, but there's also just ways where you're clearly a Catholic. And I think that starts to be the beauty of that, and maybe indicative of maybe some of that difference.
Yeah, that's interesting, because we have 4, and they range now from 20 to 32. Yeah, and they've always been, they look a lot alike, but they've always been very, very different in personality. They're all clearly Millses in one way, but they're also very different. But when they're together, they make a kind of society because they're brothers and sisters. So I think another image for the church is this kind of, I hate to use the jargon or the cliche, but it's a unity in diversity and diversity in unity. Our children are very, very different, yet it's not just that they're like each other, it's they love each other. They're part of it. They recognize themselves as a unit, as the same thing. And as a father, it's really just a blessing to watch them interact, even when they're arguing or fussing or bringing up old grudges. As a father, you'd see, these are 4 kids who grew up together. They're very different, and yet they love each other. So the other alternative is like the church is, and we all need to be better at this, is a lot of what makes the church is within all these wide, wild, sometimes very difficult differences, if we love each other, it makes the thing work. Even if it works messily and loudly and sort of incompetently, it works through love.
Well, I think that's great, and I think that leads into one of the other topics we're going to bring up from your writings, the weight of glory. So stick around, folks. We'll be back with the Uncommon Good, talking with David Mills here in a few moments. Friends, like we've been talking about, if you want to stay hip to what the show is about in the station, I just said hip, you're right, you can listen, of course, to every show, but you can also subscribe to our bi-weekly e-newsletter, In Tune, sent email every other Wednesday. Complete, easy-to-navigate source for station headlines and events, registration, program highlights, and more. Only 2 emails a month, so it's not bothering you too much. You can talk to us, Iowa Catholic Radio on Facebook, at IA Catholic Radio on Twitter, and then, if you have phone, 515-223-1150 with the Zip Whip. All sorts of ways to stay a part of Iowa Catholic Radio. Stick around. We'll be back after these messages.
Are you Catholic or culture? Why not both? The Diocese of Des Moines is proud to present the Catholic Culture Lecture Series. Join us on the 4th Saturday of every month to learn more about the Catholic Church and how it applies to your life here in Des Moines. The upcoming lecture is on March 24th at the Pastoral Center, located at 601 Grand, featuring Dr. Bud Marr on Vatican II and its effects today. A social refreshments are at 7 p.m., the lecture at 7:30, and a Q&A at 8:30. All lectures are free and open to the public. For more information, call John Wynn at 515-237-5006.
During the 1994 Rwanda genocide, Father Ubald lost 80 members of his family and 45,000 parishioners. After the genocide, he began preaching healing, forgiveness, and reconciliation. Through the grace of God, Father Ubald has been given a unique gift of healing. Join us for a Mass of healing prayer with Father while he's here in the Des Moines area. His services will be at St. Luke on March 14th at 6 p.m., St. Francis on March 15th at 6 p.m., and Christ the King on March 16th at 7 p.m. For more information, call 515-223-1150 or go to iowacatholicradio.com.
Support for the Uncommon Good is provided by Cartridge World. Cartridge World is an industry leader delivering high-performance printing products that help you save time, money, and print great.
Perfect for businesses, home offices, college students, or busy moms trying to find affordable printing supplies including ink, toner, paper, or printers. For business customers, pickup and delivery are available. Products are guaranteed or full replacement.
Cartridge World, your low-cost, environmentally friendly printing experts, 801 73rd Street in Windsor Heights, 515-564-7400, and online at cartridgeworld.com.
John Leonetti in the morning.
Stay woke this season. Have you heard that? You know, the young people using that? Woke. You know, kind of like you're woke. It's kind of the new hip thing. We are really hip in this studio right now. Oh, I can hear the radio shutting off right now. I apologize to all young people out there, all right?
Start your day the Catholic way with John Leonetti in the morning. Weekdays at 7 a.m.
R&R Realty is letting others see Jesus Christ at work through inspiring programs like John Leonetti in the morning. Only on Iowa Catholic Radio.
Back with Iowa Catholic Radio. Tony was looking asleep, so I wanted to wake him up. Yeah, no, we're back with Iowa Catholic Radio. Bo Bonner here, Bud Marr, and then we have with us David Mills, talking about the experience of the church lived on the ground. And it's been fantastic so far. David, we're glad that you're joining us back on the half hour. And let's just jump right into it. You had another article that you recently published about C.S. Lewis's wonderful work, The Weight of Glory. In Wichita, we have this wonderful bookstore called Eighth Day Books. Warren Farha is the owner, and that's his absolute favorite sermon. He talks about it all the time. So I was glad to see you wrote on that because it's such a deep, beautiful reflection on why we have an ethical concern for anyone that we come across. But not to spoil it for you, David, what's this weight of glory, and how does that speak to what we're talking about today?
Oh, well, it's a lovely sermon Lewis preached at the University Church in Oxford. He's an Anglican, and Anglicans academics sometimes preached in 1941, and it's a long. I mean, it would have taken, I think, 40 to 45 minutes to read, and it was more a kind of lecture than what we would think of as a sermon or homily, with a very involved argument. But essentially, especially the end is so moving. He talks. He points us to essentially what I found very helpful because again, even though I've written a lot about dealing with difficult people and how churches should be open to all sorts and so on. I find difficult people as difficult as anyone else. And especially as a writer, you often get comments from your readers, both on the web and sort of personal emails, and some of them, as you probably know, you have to say a quick prayer. You sometimes have forgiveness because you just said a bad word about the writer. So I find difficult people as difficult as anyone does, and my wife would probably tell you that I can myself be a difficult person. She would be wrong, of course.
No comment.
Yeah. But Lewis, actually, at the end of do you mind if I just actually read the quote?
Oh, yeah, it's wonderful. Yes.
It's much better than I would just babble on in a way that, let me actually, I prudently printed it out. Here, let me just, okay, so, as I write in the article, so Lewis explains, he's talking about the weight of glory, what God intends for us as redeemed creatures, as glorious creatures. And he says, maybe you can think too much of your own glory. You just focus on that too much. But he says you can never think too much about your neighbor's possible future glory, because he has an immortal end, and it could be good or bad. And this is what Lewis writes. It is a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses. Remember, the dullest and most uninteresting person you talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to worship, or else a horror and a corruption such as you now meet, if at all, only in a nightmare. And then he has these lovely lines. All day long we are, in some degree, helping each other to one or other of these destinations, either to be a creature that you want to worship or a horror and corruption. It is in the light of these overwhelming possibilities, it is with the awe and the circumspection proper to them that we should conduct all our dealings with one another, all friendships, all loves, all play, all politics. There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilization, these are mortal, and their life is to ours like the life of the gnat. But it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit, immortal horrors or everlasting splendors. And the last lines of the paper, next to the blessed sacrament itself, your neighbor is the holiest object presented to your senses. If he is your Christian neighbor, he is holy in almost the same way. For him also Christ, the glorifier and the glorified, glory himself is truly hidden.
Yeah, there's hardly any way to improve on that. You're right. I'm glad you just read it.
Yeah, it's a lot safe. It's usually safer to read Lewis than to try to summarize him.
Yeah, that line about next to the Blessed Sacrament itself, you won't encounter any holier thing than your neighbor, took me back to an article that you had wrote called Blaming the Poor. And Lewis's thoughts really, they call to mind the teaching of our Lord that when we encounter the least of these, we're encountering him in a profound way. And that can sometimes, in the busyness of life, it can be easy to forget. And I was curious, reading that article, why do you think in our culture there is this thread, I think, in public discourse to be quite frank, to blame the poor, to see their position as something they perhaps brought upon themselves, or they haven't extracted themselves from because they haven't tried hard enough?
Oh, yeah. Well, before I answer that, I would say one thing about the poor. I've written a lot about the poor in material terms, the worldly poor who don't have the things they need, and don't have holy status. But also, I think the other thing to remember in relation to Lewis's comments is a lot of people are poor in different ways. You can think of I know some people who are vastly wealthy and just have pots of money, but you get to know them, and they're very sad people, and for various reasons. I mean, sometimes they actually suffer a physical depression, but also sometimes they're very lonely, or they are actually socially awkward, and even in their circles, their money doesn't buy them friends. And so I think when Christ says, when you meet the least of these may be someone that you think is the most of these, because you don't see his life, you don't see behind the veil, you don't see him at home. So I think that's one thing it's often helped me, because my tendency, I think, for many of us is to say, okay, poor people, we recognize poor people, we have to be nice to poor people. But then we can be angry at rich people or prominent people or famous people and so on because we don't think of them as the poor they may very well be. We don't think of them in terms of the future horrors or future splendors that Lewis talks about.
The poverty of spirit. Yeah, I think that's a great way to keep those in mind, right, is that the Beatitudes have both blessed be the poor and blessed be the poor of spirit. And conversely, like, are we looking out for that in everyone?
Yeah, and I mean, we live in a culture, and you certainly see this in Facebook discussions all the time, where we're looking for those heroes. And that's why I think a lot of the praise of Billy Graham, came from not only his own character, but it seemed that he was a good guy. He was a good guy we could all agree on. But then at the same time, again, look at the news or look at your Facebook posts, various websites. I mean, we're also looking for enemies. We're looking for people we can point to, and like that, as soon as the story of the deputy of the Parkland shooting, supposedly not going in because he was afraid, there was just this outpouring, even from very good people in their Facebook posts about how horrible he was, and then that fellow Martin Shkreli, I think, the businessman who was convicted, just recently convicted. Again, the same thing, an outpouring of rage, and he was an enemy. Here was someone we could all agree to hate. And we live in a society that does that. And there are other people whose inclinations are different than mine who do that to the poor. You just want to say, well, it's his fault. If they had fewer children, or he didn't drink, or whatever the excuse is, he wouldn't be poor. So something I think, with a broad answer to your question, is as fallen human beings, we want to have our heroes, because we all like heroes, but we also want to have our villains. We want to have our people we can point to and feel superior to and blame. And for a lot of people, that seems to be the materially poor. And for others, it could be the materially rich.
No, I think that this always reminds me why everyone needs to read Boethius, which as a thought most people don't have, but I do. Because one of the things about
your name is Bo.
That's right, but not named after Boethius. Just a two-letter name. Okie parents thought I wasn't going to be able to spell past 3, so. But yes, Boethius. One of the things I think, they talk about the Wheel of Fortune. That's literally where we get the word, not from Vanna White and Pat Sajak. And Lady Fortune, right? This idea that fortune really does sort of dole out things randomly. But actually the deeper insight, right, is not only does Lady Fortune sort of dole out things randomly, but can take it back at any time because it rightfully belongs to her. That's how the sort of metaphor goes. And the reason I think this is sometimes important, and that I think the Middle Ages had this right, is, there's not necessarily a causal relationship to why someone has good fortune and some don't. What we really should be willing to praise, it seems, is when we're dealt a hand, how do people react? But, oh, wait, we also have to be very frank about how even reacting to the fortune we're dealt is not completely self-created, that it's a whole host of things. There's so many gifts to enumerate before we even get to talking about, like you said, moral praiseworthiness or blameworthiness. And it's one thing to tell your kids, like, be like this brave person, don't be like this coward, but it's quite another to, enjoy jumping on the coward. And I think this goes back to the weight of glory, right? Even if we can assign blame for someone being a certain way, why would that be something to celebrate and get your jollies about? And I think that's what maybe Facebook and Twitter, people have been mean to each other for years, but the sort of ease and lack of skin in the game you can have doing so might be one. I don't know if it's new, but it certainly heightens the situation.
Yeah, and I think another thing to keep in mind when we're dealing with these sort of questions is we also don't know why people are the way they are. Lewis, and so St. Augustine famously said, "We are not available to ourselves." At his point, we just don't know ourselves. If we don't know ourselves, we especially don't know other people. And more and more, sort of pastoral, and this you get this throughout the Christian pastoral tradition, the Catholic pastoral tradition, and understanding that the causes of our behavior may be very deep. That the person you're looking down upon, the homeless guy on the street, may actually be far more heroic in his struggles with his demons and temptations and upbringing and so on than we are. We just can't tell. I mean, he may have vastly more to deal with and have done vastly more with it than we do. So a lot. I mean, just prudence. A prudent idea of charity is I don't know. I should be kind to these people because I don't know why they are how they are, and I also expect the same charity and love from others and from God. So, I just my own as I get older, I see more and more of my own sort of besetting sins and temptations and faults that really were rooted in things that happened when I was growing up, or choices I made then, or so on. So prudently, I want the kind of charity and understanding from people. I have to base it. I don't know. David did this really stupid thing. Who knows why? Maybe he was having a bad day. I want that from others, and therefore I should extend it to others. You see the homeless guy. There's a lot of people say, "Look, he's just a drunk. He's just a bum. He's just on the street. Get a job." As we've probably all heard. But again, you don't know why is he there. He may have had the most horrendous upbringing, and again, be heroic just to be where he is.
Yeah, the joke I always give when people go, don't give him $5. He might go spend the money on beer, and I'm like, I currently want a beer. If you gave me $5, I would go buy one. So, anyway.
There's a story about C.S. Lewis actually doing that. Walking along the street, and I think it's supposedly Cambridge when he was a professor, and giving a street person some money, and the other guy says, using the English expression for drinking, he's just going to piss it away. And Lewis says, well, that's what I was going to do.
Yeah, David, I really liked you bringing it back to this idea and reminding us of the different kinds of poverty. Mother Teresa, who saw material poverty, abject material poverty up close, once said, like the greatest poverty that she had seen was the sadness of Westerners who were very affluent. And I think that always takes my students aback to be reminded and challenged by that. But I also like this idea of I feel like there's this thread in the conversation of the little way and developing empathy through little steps, because we can, even in talking about charity to the poor, like you're saying, we can still harbor our grudges towards the convenient enemies. And so I wonder if this Lent, maybe just committing to speaking charitably on social media might be a first step towards the weight of glory, seeing the weight of glory that C.S. Lewis is talking about.
Yeah, I did. I mean, this was some years ago when we lived in Boston, and I would, especially going to Boston, there were people on the subway who would push and shove and knock you down and slam into crowded cars ahead of you when you had to get somewhere, and it was really driving me back. I mean, it was really being very grumpy and cranky, and it finally got this sort of, I learned to say, when someone would do that, someone would do something really obnoxious or really bother me, I would stop and look at them and pray, just say, Father, this too is a child of yours. And that helped enormously for me, just to actually articulate that in my mind, even though the person had just shoved me out of the way and gotten the last place on the car, and I was going to have to wait another 15 minutes in the rain. It helped. It really was a reorienting sort of thing. I mean, yeah. So I find a lot of even just practical prayers like that, or even just saying a quick Hail Mary, Our Father, for someone that you dislike or you want to dislike or you want to get angry at, it can completely reorient you and remember, okay, this too is a child of God. This too is someone God loved. This too, Jesus died for this person just like me. I think that kind of just been very helpful.
Well, David, it's been a wonderful conversation, and last week we had on the show Father Dave Pecking, who's a priest here in Pittsburgh.
Good friend.
And he's published on this new initiative that you have, hourofourdeath.org. Could you tell our listeners real quick what was sort of the inspiration for this site, and what are some of the things your community is seeking to do through that initiative?
Well, it's part of something called the Memento Mori initiative, which is to help Catholics think about and practice of Catholic death and dying. And it comes out of two observations from the people who created it. One is that the Church has all sorts of blessings and benefits and helps when you're suffering. Either you're facing your own death, you're facing lost someone you love. And two, we have kind of what I call Catholic blessings, which are also duties, like praying for the dead and like celebrating the funeral mass. And pastors say a lot of even weekly Mass-going Catholics are losing those. They're not having, they're not praying for the dead. They have no real belief in purgatory. They don't go to the All Souls Mass. And they don't have their departed fathers or mothers or grandfathers grandmother is, buried with a funeral mass. And so a lot of the site is to sort of return people, both for their own comfort, I mean, all the resources the church has, but also to do as Catholics what we ought to do, one of which is to pray for the dead and to have masses offered for them. And the site in particular is a place where people who have suffered death and dying, either their own or that of a loved one, or thought about it, can share their stories. So there's some teaching on the site, but it's mostly a place where mostly Catholics and sometimes other believers will simply share their stories. So you can sort of find, if you're going through something, we want a place where readers can find stories from other people who've gone through it and have some, partly just to share their stories, partly share their insights, their wisdom, because there's really nothing on the web where you can go and say, my dad is dying, and this happened to me. I mean, I had no place to find, sort of comfort, advice, just to find other people who've gone through it. So we want to provide that, just a lot of stories with some teaching, with some wisdom and insights, where people can find this is what death is, this is what I went through, and this is what I can share with you.
Well, David, one more time, if you give that website address and then anywhere else people can find some of your writing before we let you go.
Oh, well, the site is www.hourofourdeath.org. And then my own, one place you can find my own writings is just, if you could Google Aleteia, ALETEIA.com, and David Mills, it'll pull up my author page.
Well, that's fantastic. We look forward to having you back on again. We appreciate you coming on the show. And then, speaking of fate and Lady Fortune, I know Mike Aquilina in the comment section of my wife's birthday post on Facebook basically invited me to come to Pittsburgh to talk. So you guys figure something out, and I'll go out and I'll get to meet you in person, David.
Oh, that would be great. We'd love to have you. And then, so Bud has already blazed the way for you.
There you go. Well, God bless. Thank you for coming on the show, and we'll hope to talk to you again soon.
Okay, great. We appreciate it.
Thanks, David.
Bye.
Well, Bud, I was worried when we were hearing about annoying people in the church that this was going to be like a radio intervention about you and me that everybody had cooked up with David Mills.
I actually set the table for David to really confront you, and I was hoping that's the way the interview would go. But I guess he had deeper spiritual insights in mind, so that worked out fine.
Yeah, the idea about people pushing you in the subway in Boston, he was low key, like, hey Bo, there's no subway in Des Moines, so and I'm guessing if there was a subway in Des Moines, it'd be like the most polite subway in the entire world, because people in Iowa are very polite.
Yeah, I thought you were about to say that when he was talking about that story, he was preaching your language, because you're like, I'd like to push some Bostonians around.
That's right. Yeah, especially if the Patriots would have won another Super Bowl. But
that's right.
Right. Well, this is the Uncommon Good, Bud. We've come to the end of another show. We appreciate everybody listening. We're going to be back next week with same bat time, same bat channel, bullwhips, eagles. We got the whole deal, Bud. So people, make sure to come back. This is the Uncommon Good. For Bud Marr, I'm Bo Bonner. We will talk to you next week. Bud, this is the portion of the show where we talk about what's coming up next in Iowa, and man, you're kind of the big deal coming up, so tell people what you're doing and when you'll be back.
Saturday, March 24th at 7 p.m., I'll be speaking for the Catholic Culture Series in Des Moines. The topic for the evening will be Interpreting Vatican II, so I'm very much looking forward to that opportunity.
So we got you coming back. Like I said, we just got done with the men's conference. It's great. We already have it set up for next year. We have, like I said, April 5th coming up at Mercy College. We'll have our Faith and Healing lecture series with Dr. William English, who not only is going to have some wonderful things to say about the medical industry in terms of the common good, but also, like I said, was my sponsor of the church, my oldest son's godfather, so he will undoubtedly have some fun insight to give. Was at school with Bud and I as well. What else do we have going on? Well, next week we have Carathon. So, folks, it's one thing to say that Iowa Catholic Radio is the voice on the radio, or to say the people in the background making whip noises and eagles. Those aren't recordings. That's, Jeb can make an eagle sound. Or the people up front, or the people doing all these things. But Iowa Catholic Radio is all of us, including you. And if you want to be a part of this ministry, we're always willing to take your donation so that we can keep this ministry going, but particularly next week with Carathon. Feel free to call in. You can start calling now, 515-223-1150, but the idea is you get to be a part of this wonderful work of this station, and we love having you be a part of our show.
Yeah, and if you, I would encourage you to start your day right. Each morning we have 5 a.m., read the Bible in a year. That's followed by the Rosary and the Angelus. So if you're a night owl like me and you really want a serious Lenten discipline, start your morning with prayer at 5 a.m. on Iowa Catholic Radio.
If you want to join up and listen to what's going on, In Tune is the bi-weekly newsletter, only 2 times a month, every other Wednesday. You can contact us at Facebook, Iowa Catholic Radio. Our Twitter handle is at IA Catholic Radio. And then, as always, if you want to text, the show's almost over, but you can leave one for us on ZipWhip. 515-223-1150. Bud, as always, an honor, a privilege to be in your radio presence, sir.
Thanks for having me. We'll looking forward to being with you all next week.
May Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, reign in our hearts, in our families, in our town, the city, county, state, country, hemisphere, globe, entire world, universe. This is The Uncommon Good. We'll see you next week.
The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr is heard every week on wonderful Catholic stations like this one, and anytime on podcast. Just search for The Uncommon Good.